Hi, this is Ruth Weigand. This video will show how Sterling Transformation Extender Pack for Healthcare supports WEDI SNP validation levels 5 through 7 in the HIPAA data compliance map. So first we'll start with type 5. Type 5 validation, code set values are checked. During validation, using a MongoDB or similar NoSQL document-based database or relational database through JDBC. The product provides a utility map to load these values, and the user can either modify data prior to loading or edit with the database tool after their choice after loading. So the load maps are shipped in the examples, and they're very easy to run, but you need to have connectivity to your database. And this is done through the Transformation Extender Resource Registry capability, where you have a configuration file that points to a resource name file that has the resource names that actually get used within the load maps and HIPAA data compliance during the code set lookup. I have MongoDB installed on my local host, so I can just use the defaults that we ship with the example. But if your server is defined elsewhere, then you just need to edit this file. Our example also shows how to set up JDBC connectivity if you're using a relational database with JDBC. The resource registry lookup or resource name resolution varies depending on what runtime we're using. If I'm going to run the map directly in Design Studio, I need to set the Transformation Extender run option to point to the configuration file. This is a long path, but it is pointing to that MRC that we ship with the examples. Once we know we have the correct MRC and MRN configured to point to, then I said the loading of the maps is done through this source map, load code set MMS, and you can load a single code set or all of them at once, or you can then delete them all if you want to, start over again. The input file that's used when you use load code all is this code set JSON list. And if you don't want to load all these code sets, you can delete the lines. It's also possibly a recommendation when you're first getting set up to only try to load a few at a time to make sure everything is configured properly with your connectivity. I'm just going to build all the maps, and then I'm going to run load all code sets. And this will vary in length depending on your connectivity and whether you are actually loading them all. The output is a simple list of the loads and a return code on whether the collection loaded properly. And if you have a user interface to access your database separately, then you can also confirm that that was loaded and the collections are there in your database. In this case, again, I've got MongoDB running locally. So now that the code sets are loaded, to enable type 5 validation, it's very simple to update in your HIPAA data compliance JSON, which is the JSON version of the parameter file and has a simple interface to turn on type 5 through 6. I went ahead and enabled all of them at the moment. I also have the translated acknowledgement enabled, and I'm using the new both parameter so I can get both an HTML version and a JSON version of that acknowledgement. So what I'm running with, I'm pointing to that parameter file. I've updated my input transmission to use just the 277CA sample instead of all transaction set. And if I run that, normally you would do a build all if you need to compile all the run maps under HIPAA data compliance. I had just updated the transmission data, so I only need to rebuild this top level map. And then when I run that, the output is valid, very boring because we try to ship our sample data with no errors. But if we then go in and pick a code that I know is going to be doing a type 5 lookup in this STC segment, and I make that 800, which is an invalid value. Now, if I go back and run, it's doing the lookup, and I get the type 5 error reported. This is the JSON, the new JSON version, which is basically saying the same thing. The type 5 errors are reported in the 999 as any other error would be. And they also participate in claim level objection if this was a claim and not a claim acknowledgement. And only one of the claims had a type 5 error, then only that claim would be rejected, etc. Going on to type 6 validation, which is line of service testing. It's really defined as a process of confirming that the HIPAA X12 transaction data for claims complies with a specific line of service requirement. And they're generally expressed as situational rules and may be associated with segments or data elements, such as ambulance, chiropractic, or podiatry. I like to think of them in 3 parts, whereas you have the main rule where a segment must be present for a line of service. What is a line of service, like ambulance, and what segment or element do you need to inspect to determine whether the claim involves the line of service? Now, again, in the parameter file, we just do a simple enablement of the type 6. And then we run it the same way. I'm going to point to a different input file, though, that will show a type 6 error. And this is one of the rules that is shipped in the rules qualifier file. If I update that data, save the map, recompile that map, I now see that my error is reporting this. And so for the rules that we ship in the qualifier file, we do also ship some load files that get loaded into MongoDB within that initial load all that we did. So finally, type 7 companion guide testing is kind of a mix of how the validation is really run. So it can be like type 4 or 5 rules that enforce situational rules or code set, but only for certain trading partners. And we define which trading partners get enforced by a GSO3 correlation. So in the type 7 value.json, which is used by the HIPAA data compliance.map, you have a specification of a GSO3 value and an institution, which is a line of business. And then this correlates to a qualifier entry. This is one of the few type 7 rules that we shipped based on some initial medical requirements that were defined in the TR3. And so how the mapping is done by HIPAA data compliance, not really a mapping, the correlation. So what you have here matches here, and then this is the GSO3 value, and this test data I'm using has that GSO3 value in the input data. So this is where you see you can have multiple partners that map to the same line of business, which is defined in the rule, or you could have a single partner. So running this now, we're going to point to this input. And again, just rebuild that top level map because we're only changing the input. And now our output has the type 7 errors that we've reported. So the other way to perform type 7 validation through HIPAA data compliance is to provide a user-written Java exit, which uses a defined interface that we document in the examples in the type 7 exit. There's a README You can kind of create your own rule definition in the Java exit. You just have to conform to the error return information structure that we provide so that we can process it like the other errors that are enforced through HIPAA data compliance. So in this case, I'm going to actually point to a different parameter file. And this has the exit name, class name, and the function that I'm going to call. And then I'm going to use the input data also. So let me go back now and change the JSON parameter file and pick up the new input data. We'll then run this. And this is the one of the sample rules we ship where we make sure that the claim date is not before the birth date. So that's all there is to it as far as enabling the type 5 through 7 validation and executing it with HIPAA data compliance. Thank you.